Welcome to the land of Nod! Ugh, sorry. Anyway, here's the Nod unit guide. So the Nod do have several units that are pretty much the same as the GDIs, although they arguably look cooler, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, stuff like the Soldier, Shotgunner, Officer, Rocket Soldier, etc. They're even in the same place on the menu for your convenience, so that kind of gives you an idea of what you're going to get if you know the GDI stuff. So I'll ask you to refer to the GDI units for those things. I'll only be covering the things that either have no direct analog to the GDI or stuff like the Black Hand Sniper or Raveshaw, which do have direct analogs but different names. So let's start with the unique Nod freebie base unit. You might recall from the first video I said that the GDI's Grenadier was unique to them. So instead of that, the Nod get this handy flamethrower. It throws flame. So that's always fun. As you might expect, the range isn't fantastic. It's very much a close-range weapon, but it still gets further than you might first surmise. You can see I'm pretty much reaching the obelisk of light here, which is pretty good. Now, definitely one advantage of attacking with a flamethrower is flames coming at you and getting in your screen tend to bamboozle the enemy. And you can see the tank is pretty substantial. You can go for several seconds of sustained fire. Oh, somebody wants a flamin'. So yeah, many seconds of sustained fire on a single tank with this puppy. And you have 4 tanks equivalent in reserve, so you can spend a lot of time on the front lines throwing flame without having to worry about going for a refill. No alternate fire because throwing flame is cool enough by itself, but you will notice the little bit of fire at the impact point. That'll do some splash damage, so you don't have to be direct on with your flame to get some damage onto people. And there'll also be a little bit of afterburn damage after you hit someone, so that's kind of nice. Pretty decent against light armor too if you can get up, just because of the amount of fire it puts out. So, you might recall that in the GDI unit guide, I expressed a certain minor affection for the flak cannon. Sadly, I must report that the Nod have no McFarlane equivalent and thus no flak cannon. You know what? Screw these guys. This video's over. But wait! They have another gun that turns people into skeletons! Alright, we're back on. So yeah, the Nod Chemical Trooper is essentially a Flame Trooper plus. He's not free, he costs 150 credits, which is still really cheap. You can buy one of these guys right off the bat at the start of a round and start melting dudes. And his Chemical Thrower essentially functions the same as the Flamethrower. Has pretty much the same stats. Might have a bit more range. That might just be my imagination though, so don't quote me on that. One thing for sure though, it does like double the damage of the Flamethrower. So obviously quite a bit more effective. Also has the 150 health because he is a tier 1 unit. Costs that little bit of credits. And again, turns dudes into skeletons. So yeah, way better. Boink. Also, this means that the Nod have 2 different units that turn guys into skeletons, therefore objectively making them the best faction. Whoa, skeleton. So in addition to melting down infantry and light armor way more effectively than the Flamethrower, the Chemical Trooper has a special property. So the chemical he's throwing in these little biohazard tanks is actually liquid Tiberium, which means the Chemical Trooper has a suit to protect himself from Tiberium, which means he can walk through these Tiberium fields that would normally do damage to other infantry without a care in the world. That's pretty handy, especially for some maps like, I think Mesa has a big Tiberium field right in the middle that other infantry have to go around, and you can just kind of stomp right through with a Chemical Trooper and not worry about it. Also, the original Renegade had both Flame Troopers and Chemical Troopers having reduced explosive / fire damage. I don't know for sure if that's the case in this, but it's something to keep in mind. That might be the case. You might be able to run over mines, take tank shells, etc., rockets with a Chemical Trooper and a Flame Trooper more effectively than other units. But again, haven't confirmed that yet. Melt. So one aspect of the flamethrower I didn't get into yet, and it only applies more so with the chemical trooper, despite their low or non-existent cost, their relatively high sustained damage means that they're pretty effective against buildings. A chemical thrower, even by himself, with a single tank, takes a building down 10%, so that's pretty good. That means that anytime you can pull a big squad of flamethrowers, run them to the enemy base, and start burning the place down, and yeah, do quite a bit of damage that way, even if your barracks are destroyed. And if your barracks are in effect, everyone can pull some cheap chemical throwers, get in there, and really wreck up the place. And to be clear, I didn't mention the GDI as clearly as I should have. Hitting this master control terminal with any weapon does more damage to it, not just C4. And that also means that a chemical thrower, with his default C4 and his thrower, can bring down a building all by himself surprisingly effectively if he can get inside for how cheap he is. And if you got 2 or 3, oof, watch out. So yeah, keep that in mind. Great for melting buildings. Chemical throwers are generally just great. Oh, and unfortunately, vehicles and buildings do not turn into skeletons when you melt them down. So yeah, hopefully they fix that. Oh, and you should note that that damage bonus for hitting an MCT doesn't just apply to damaging it, it also applies to repairing it. So if you're directly repairing the master control terminal, you will repair at double the rate that you would if you were just blasting the walls with the beam. That's double either the base engineer or the base technician slash hotwire. So yeah, this is where you want to be getting your repairs done, if at all possible. It'll go way, way faster. Now the Black Hand Sniper. It's functionally identical to Deadeye, so I won't cover anything special about that. $500, 200 health, bolt action rifle. Still does decent damage against light armor, so don't be afraid to use it to kind of plink away at enemy arty that's messing up your base. One thing I will especially note that I didn't point out with the GDI, it's the same for both, is sniper rifle bullets travel pretty much instantly, whereas other bullets actually do have a little bit of travel time to them, including the marksman rifle. So that's another reason that this is just a better sniper weapon than the marksman. Is when you shoot, you don't really have to lead, whereas with the marksman, you'll have to be leading a bit to really peg your target. Now, the flame and chemical throwers were both great examples of Nod's chaotic scorched earth tactics, but perhaps the most emblematic unit for them, as the devious and sneaky bastards they are, is the stealth Black Hand. So you see the weird effect I've got going on my weapon, and indeed on myself. It's because I'm actively cloaked. Stealth Black Hands automatically actively cloak a few seconds after they stop firing their weapon. And what weapon do they normally fire? This laser rifle. The laser rifle fires in a 3-round burst, and it's just a really good weapon all around. It can do good damage to infantry and light and heavy armor. So you can sneak these guys up behind even a heavy tank and kind of start unloading and do a fair amount of damage. Perhaps its only real weaknesses are kind of functional in that the sights here are kind of tricky to use. They can obscure your target pretty bad. And I mean, just by nature of the blast from the laser and the fire itself, it can be kind of hard to track your target. And doesn't have a whole lot of ammo in reserve. But otherwise, yeah, really, really strong weapon all around. And actually even does a little bit of afterburn damage, which is kind of nice. Hey, buddy, lasers? This might not well. Ah, fine. So the laser rifle is great, but of course the true strength of the stealth Black Hand is its ability to cloak in there and get to high-value units, or more likely, high-value buildings. So you actually, when you're cloaked, won't appear for other people until you're within a certain range, and even at that point, you still look like this shimmery mist, so it's hard to keep track of you. So black hands are usually used for getting into a base and placing a nuke beacon. And then, of course, you can defend that beacon. Well, it counts down the 60 seconds, at which point, boom. I didn't mention with the GDI when I was talking about disarming the beacons, but once there's 10 seconds remaining, it is too late, so no point in trying to disarm them at that point. Just get out of the area.
20, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6,
I should leave,
5,
but
4,
it's
3,
just
2,
so
1.
beautiful.
Infantry barracks destroyed.
Oh, I'm fine. Oh, and one final note, that cloak, it won't fool any automatic base defenses. Yeah, so gotta get those shut down before you can do any base sneaky. So remember the chain gun that So remember the chain gun that the GDI officer and, by extension, the NOD officer carried? So this is... Okay. Remember the chain gun that the... Sorry, this map is fantastic, but it's really tough to talk over all this thunder. Better. Alright, so as I was saying, do you remember the GDI officer's chain gun, and by extension, the NOD officer's chain gun? So this is basically the Uber chain gun, the laser chain gun. The laser chain gunner carries this, 450 credits, and functions very similar to the regular chain gun. Spins up, spins down, you can zoom in to make it more steady. Pretty much the same range, I believe, but quite a bit more damage, and also very effective against heavy armor. Let's see if I can get up there. Oh, used it all up trying to close the distance. Anyway, yeah, laser chain gunner, basically a chain gun on steroids. Rate of fire is a little bit lower than with the regular chain gun, and also the capacity is a little bit lower, but makes up for it, more than makes up for it with its damage. So yeah, if you want to tear things up with sustained fire, laser chain gunner is for you. And of course, a tier 2 weapon, so 200 health, just like the stealth black hand, who also had 200 health. Get you the hot beams of laser to die. You did it. Great job. So Sakura. Sakura is Havoc. She's got the same ramjet rifle, still blasts infantry hilariously, still tears up light armor. One thing you should be aware that I didn't mention with Havoc, it's the same with Sakura. This rifle actually creates that blue streak you can kind of see when you fire. So it's much easier to track than, say, the Deadeye or Blackhand sniper rifle round. And also, just like with that sniper rifle, the round hits instantly, so no need to worry about leading your target, just fire and ouch. So Raveshaw is the NOD equivalent of Sydney, kind of looks like M. Bison, has this railgun that works just like the personal ion cannon, great against armor, not super great against infantry just because of the low rate of fire and slightly more difficult to target them. But yeah, he's Sydney, but he's got a railgun. Looks like M. Bison. Oh, and the railgun has what looks like the GDI markings scratched off and NOD scratched on, so that's pretty good. Alright, maybe he's better than Sydney. And the final tier 3 NOD unit is Mendoza, and he is the equivalent of Dr. Mobius, so he's got the same Volt automatic rifle. Now, one thing I actually missed, what are those rockets doing? Neat! Oh wait, skeleton, skeleton, skeleton. So yes, it remains an inarguable fact that skeletonization is the best. Now, one thing I actually didn't know about the Volt automatic rifle, and thanks to a kindly fellow on my comments for pointing this out, so this applies to Mobius just like it applies to Mendoza, is you got your primary fire, which is the directed beam of electricity that tears things up. And let me just get this reloaded quick here. but if you use the alternate fire, you actually fire a much more spread out blast of electricity at the cost of double the ammo consumption. But yeah, basically you get a big laser shotgun beam, just pretty great. So you can skeletonize a big group of guys even more effectively. You're a skeleton. So finally we have the Nod Hotwire equivalent, this Sturmtruppen looking dude with the jacket that says Technician on the back, which is pretty badass. He just happens to be the Technician, and yeah, he's got the same advanced repair gun, same huge amount of explosives, so great for taking down buildings if you can get him in there. Just the same as Hotwire in every way, except for not a rad lady, so I might call this one a draw. Nah, the GDI get this one. And of course, although the Nod don't generally have to worry about stealth black hands sneaking into their base and wrecking up the place, they still want to place a bunch of mines around to protect the structures, etc., approaches, and the Technician can do that just like Hotwire. A little point I should point out now that I didn't mention with the GDI guide, it applies to both. You have a limited number of mines per team. You can see the little mine count at the bottom of the screen, right above the maximum vehicle count for the team. And so anything above that, mines will start to explode / disappear. So you can't quite completely make an impenetrable mine disaster. Try to keep mines placed in locations that are very likely to be traveled, aka in front of doors, up ramps, in front of the MCT, etc. Sakura, basically, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Hand of Nod under attack.
So Sakura, ah,